it's going to be the same outcome. It's the same thing that Democrats should learn, Democrats in leadership should learn right now, that it doesn't matter.
You see them starting to limit the free speech of their own citizens, even as those citizens are protesting against things like the border invasion.
Look, I said what I said, which is that we do have, of course, a special relationship with our friends in the UK and also with some of our European allies.
JD Vance has just issued a stark warning that's sending shockwaves through European capitals. He claims the UK and broader Europe are sleepwalking towards civilizational suicide. But is this American political figure overstepping? Or does he see something European leaders are missing?
Again, started attacking the free speech laws in the EU and the UK, which is not a part of the EU.
So look, I want Europe to thrive. I want them to be an important ally. Part of that is going to be Europe respecting its own people.
While European politicians dismiss his concerns as American interference, the evidence on the ground tells a different story. From Britain's immigration crisis to Germany's free speech restrictions, this video unpacks why Vance believes Europe's elites have become dangerously disconnected from the reality faced by ordinary citizens. What if the people making decisions about your country's future haven't set foot in an ordinary neighbourhood in decades? JD Vance has recently highlighted this troubling reality, a growing chasm between those who create policy and those who live with its consequences. It's the tale of two Europes, one inhabited by a protected class of decision-makers, and another experienced by everyday citizens bearing the brunt of those decisions.
Then it doesn't matter what I think about Europe. Germany will have killed itself, and I hope they don't do that because I love Germany and I want Germany to thrive.
Some of our European allies, but we also know that there have been infringements on free speech that actually affect not just the British.
The metropolitan elite, as Vance describes them, exist in a carefully insulated bubble. These bureaucrats and politicians craft immigration policies from behind security details and gated communities, while ordinary Europeans face the daily realities these policies create. When citizens voice legitimate concerns about overcrowded cities and failing social services, they're often met with dismissive labels, xenophobic, extremist, or worse. This patronising response only deepens the divide. Look at Germany, where neighbourhoods in Berlin have undergone profound transformation. Working-class residents who express concern about integration challenges find themselves labelled as right-wing troublemakers, rather than citizens with valid perspectives. Meanwhile, the politicians doing the labelling retreat each evening to affluent enclaves, untouched by the policies they champion.
A country like Germany, where you have another few million immigrants come in from countries that are totally culturally incompatible with Germany,
but also affect American technology companies and by extension American citizens. So that is something that we'll talk about today at lunch.
In France, the situation is even more striking. President Macron delivers lofty speeches about tolerance and inclusion from the pristine corridors of the Élysée Palace, while areas like Seine-Saint-Denis have become essentially ungovernable. The elite experience of France bears little resemblance to the France experienced by average citizens. The UK follows a similar pattern. Politicians advocating for borderless ideals typically reside in London's wealthiest boroughs or in pastoral countryside retreats. They don't queue in overwhelmed NHS facilities or struggle to find school places for their children in areas where services are stretched beyond capacity.
And you'll see. Anyway, here's the headline from the AP. Vance criticizes Germany's free speech laws in remarks to conservatives.
I really believe that we have a great deal in common with Europe. And I'm not, yes, the Europeans annoy me sometimes, and yes, I disagree with them on certain issues.
What's particularly telling is how voters are responding. Recent polling data shows a dramatic erosion of trust in establishment parties across Europe. Citizens increasingly turn to candidates promising stronger border control and a return to policies that prioritise the needs of existing communities. It's not hate driving this shift, it's the legitimate frustration of people who feel their concerns have been ignored for too long. This legitimate frustration isn't just being ignored, it's being criminalised. In the UK, expressing concerns about immigration policies online could earn you a permanent police record for a non-crime hate incident, potentially destroying your career prospects and travel opportunities. When did European democracies decide that silencing citizens was preferable to addressing their concerns? The continent that gave birth to the Enlightenment, that championed the very concept of free expression, now leads the world in punishing speech. While America's First Amendment continues to protect even uncomfortable opinions, Europeans face an expanding web of restrictions that effectively criminalize dissent. The contrast couldn't be more stark or more troubling.
From an Emmanuel Macron, or a Keir Starmer in this case, who did the very same thing. He gave the Emmanuel Macron treatment to J.D. Vance.
We have to remember that is the cradle of Western civilization, the entire idea of Christian civilization that led to the founding of the United States of America.
Consider what's happening in Germany, where the notorious NetzDG law forces social media companies to remove anything deemed hateful content within 24 hours or face crushing fines up to 50 million euros. This creates a perverse incentive structure where platforms over-censor to avoid financial penalties. Your perfectly reasonable comment about integration challenges, deleted. Your question about crime statistics, removed. Your concern about cultural changes in your neighbourhood, flagged as potential hate speech. The human cost of these policies becomes clear in individual cases. Take Mark Meechan, the Scottish man prosecuted and fined for teaching his girlfriend's pug to raise its paw in response to certain phrases. A joke that landed him in court. Or consider the countless British citizens who discover during employment background checks that they have non-crime hate incidents on their police records. Permanent black marks for expressing opinions that broke no actual laws but offended someone somewhere.
We've had free speech for a very, very long time in the United Kingdom, and it will last for a very, very long time.
That was formed in Europe. The cultural bonds, the religious bonds, these things are going to last beyond political disagreements.
What's particularly disturbing is how selectively these speech codes are enforced. Working class citizens find themselves targeted, while political elites enjoy remarkable latitude to make sweeping generalizations about backward or intolerant communities. The message is unmistakable. Some voices matter more than others in modern Europe. The consequences extend far beyond individual injustice. When honest discussion about social challenges becomes effectively prohibited, problems don't disappear. They fester underground, unacknowledged, and unaddressed. Integration difficulties, cultural tensions, and community concerns don't vanish when banned from public discourse. They simply grow outside the spotlight until they erupt in ways far more damaging than any uncomfortable conversation would have been. This is the uncomfortable truth at the heart of Vance's message. Democracy cannot function without free speech. When European governments silence citizens who raise legitimate concerns, they're cutting off the very mechanism needed to solve their mounting social problems. The irony is painful. The same leaders who claim to defend democratic values are systematically dismantling its foundation.
Appearance at a conservative gathering outside Washington, linking the country's limits against hate speech to American troops stationed there.
They are unable to or unwilling, too many countries, to control their borders. You see them starting to push back against that, and good. That's a good thing.
What Vance recognizes, and what Europe's governing class refuses to see, is that silencing dissent doesn't make problems disappear. It allows them to metastasize beyond control. The survival of European democracy isn't threatened by citizens asking uncomfortable questions. It's endangered by leaders who believe they can legislate reality away through speech codes and social engineering. Unless European leaders abandon their authoritarian impulses and engage honestly with citizen concerns, the continent faces a grim choice: continued democratic erosion or an eventual populist backlash that may sweep away more than just the current political order. Vance isn't trying to undermine Europe. He's throwing it a lifeline before it's too late.